Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claire Aguilar. I'm the Director of Programming and Industry Engagement here at Sheffield Doc Fest. And I'd like to welcome you to Sheffield Doc Fest number 22. As you know, Sheffield is more than a documentary festival, and we're going to see that here with this incredible performance / film that we have tonight for today. It's not night yet. I'm ahead of myself. This afternoon for you, called Michael Nyman's War Work: 8 Songs for Film. This is the UK premiere of this film performance, and we're very, very pleased to present it here at Doc Fest. This is a great opportunity to see the work of a really renowned composer, director, and what we're going to do, since it is a performance, is have a few words from Michael Nyman before he comes to perform with the band. And also, we're going to be joined with the editor of War Work, whose name is Max Pugh. And also, I'd like to introduce the moderator for a short introduction question and answer period, who will be Nick Fraser, the editor of Storyville on BBC. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Michael, Max, and Nick to the stage, and they'll tell you a little bit about what you're going to see. Thank you.
So I'm going to sit down now. Hi, I'm here with Michael and Max Pugh, and we have to fulfill a very difficult function. That is, we have to talk at the beginning of the film rather than the end of the film. So we have to give you some idea about what you're going to see without giving it all away. And I think the BBC used to do this in the 1960s. Before they had the idea it was better to talk about things after they'd happened. But now they don't really talk about things at all. They just put things out. So anyway, I'm here because I am the editor of Storyville and I work at the BBC, but I'm here because Michael invited me a few months ago to an early performance of this work in Paris. And I should say that I'm a lover of music, but by no means I don't have any sort of expertise. But what I remembered Michael's work for were all these wonderful film scores, such as the Draughtsman's Contract, such as the piano, and also for his very generous and startling contribution to Man on Wire, of which I was executive producer and which I think made the film in some way. I mean, the film is, when you remember the film, you remember Michael's music and these astonishing images. And Michael, you've always been keen on working with film, right? Oh, you've got one. You like to work with film.
Well, there was never any choice. I was a composer between 1961 and 64, a music critic between 1968 and 76, and then a composer again since 1976. And at the time I started composing again in 1976, I was associated with two extremes of British cinema. One led to a lot of work with Peter Greenaway. I worked on a film with him called 1 to 100. And at the same time, in the same year, I worked on a film called, wrote a soundtrack for a film called Keep It Up Downstairs, which was a slightly, let's say, bawdy take on Upstairs, Downstairs, produced by Hazel Adair, who was responsible for Crossroads, and with a most remarkable cast of English actors and actresses, Willie Rushton and Diana Dawes. And it was basically... Is
that a sort of low culture side of you? Because you do symphonies as well. You do.
I do symphonies, but maybe the Draughtsman's Contract is low culture. How do we know? We need to...
Well, we don't really believe in high culture or low culture anymore, do we?
So, in a way, as I say, when I started being a composer again in '76, Having been silent for 12 years, Greenaway was in a position as a filmmaker where he wanted new scores by a living composer rather than taken off LPs and CDs. So at the moment that I became a composer, I also became a soundtrack composer.
And do these soundtracks, I mean, do they take a long, long time to do? But you work very fast, don't you? I'm told you're an insomniac and you just compose things in a huge burst.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the writing of a soundtrack is impeded by the film and impeded by the director. But strangely enough,
you mean because the film's bad or the director's difficult?
As you wish, or maybe both. And in the case of both Draughtsman's Contract and the piano, strangely enough, the soundtrack was written before a single frame of the film was shot. So that gives me an opportunity to have, to make a voice out of the musical voice. Okay,
without anticipating you're all about to see, give us some idea about how you got into this particular project, which is, it's not necessarily unusual for you, because the great thing about your career is that it doesn't follow any tedious pattern.
No.
You mean it should or what?
I've been involved with feature film directors. I've been involved, as you said, with documentary directors. I mean, Greenaway, once upon a time, used to make documentaries. And Man on Wire and Trisha Ziff's Mexican Suitcase. But I also make films, but the kind of films I make are like street photography. I mean, they're observational films of things that take place in front of me in the street. And another strand of what I do is to write soundtracks for films made that directors are no longer living. So I've done a soundtrack for Battleship Potemkin and 3 Dziga Vertov films, including Man with a Movie Camera. And so I was invited by 5 cultural organizations, concert halls in Europe, to make a piece of some sort to celebrate, commemorate something or other, First World War, which is something very unusual in the sense that usually the subjects of my films are subjects that I choose. And the second thing is I've never been into a film archive in my life. So Max and I found ourselves in the French military film archive in Paris looking at available material. And I think you remember, Max, my first reaction was all this black and white 1916, 1914 footage looks like Dziga Vertov. So Man with a Movie Camera or the 11th year, Sixth Part of the World were kind of made less than 10 years after this First World War footage. So that immediately set some sort of cultural parameter for me. And then the search for material developed partly on a basis of how I liked what I saw when I wasn't looking for anything in particular. And then the conversation with Max, which was about the cost of licensing the material, which was generally too much for the kind of small budget we had. So those 2 factors, especially the licensing question, the financial question, led us to concentrate on and use visual material archive that no other filmmaker would, I don't know, would possibly use.
Say that what you're about to see very, very strikingly does not look like what you've seen about World War I. I mean, for those of you who have poppy fatigue, don't worry, because it's profoundly shocking, and it's sort of contemporaneous in its shockingness. But what did you tell us a bit more about how you selected this material?
Well, I should start by saying, or slightly correcting Michael, that your first reaction, and in fact our first reaction, was of terror. I mean, it was a very daunting project, but partly because there was so much World War I commemoration going on the main broadcast channels around the world of such high quality and so well researched, that we wondered what on earth we would do with this vast subject. Should we be responsible historically? It was very daunting, and the selection of the footage was, I think, as a reaction to that, I certainly started looking for the strangest, most unexpected moments that I knew would fit Michael's aesthetic.
That's strange in what way exactly?
Literally the bits in between. Like if you look through the original reels, they include the clapperboards. And in the French archive, you'd see this bearded military figure who's on the camera team, because they're military crews filming the military, take a puff of a huge cigar right on the point where he's about to clap the clapperboard. And that bit was more interesting than the bit after the clapperboard.
Yeah, well, what you actually see this military man doing is teaching a soldier not only how to fire a rifle, but how to position his feet. So there's a sense in which there's a lot of preparation for war in this film, which looks very comedic in the light of other sequences in the film when you see the effects of war. So this sort of French training camp with all these wonderful-looking young men in their kind of clean, white singlets looks as though they're training for school sports.
Did you get a sense when you went through this archive of why people chose to record this stuff? I mean, it's not martial, it's not commemorative of victories, it's actually profoundly shocking. So what was the impulse behind these anonymous filmmakers all that time ago? What were they really trying to show people, or were they just filming things?
A lot of it was filmed to order. The French military archive was clearly very precise. There were clearly precise reasons behind each film, training films principally, to show others how to use a pistol, how to throw a grenade, and that sort of thing. The interpretative question, or point of view in the film, I think rather than coming from the footage, comes more from Michael's use of artists' work.
Yeah, because it's at some,
an artist's point of view on the war.
Because at some point I kind of got fed up with black and white, and I said to Max, we need some color. So I then found a book by Richard Cork about Great War visual art, and we chose some kind of, I mean, most of the gory images actually come from paintings rather than from the archive. And then obviously the music works on a sort of totally different level, and the music, I mean, the reason that this piece, film, whatever you like to call it, is called War Work 8 Songs with Film, is that when I originally started with the film as a filmmaker, there was a kind of authentic soundtrack provided by me, which was just doing the job that soundtracks should do, don't always do, but that's something else. And then I found a piece of music on Facebook, strangely enough, by Rossini, which I thought would make a wonderful backing track to a First World War song. So I found a text by a totally unknown German poet called August Stram, who was kind of connected with Dada, and there's a lot of Dada elements in the film. And he wrote poems with each line was just a single word. So there's a kind of sung, shouted poem with the backing of this, of an edited version of this piece of Rossini religious music. And then I kind of rather got the taste for writing songs based on musical archive. So there's a lot of suspicion in the music business that there isn't in. I mean, you make a film that uses archive. You're a painter and you do appropriation. If you're a composer and you work on appropriation, you're considered to be some kind of thief or or lacking some sort of imagination. So I decided to bring together the archive of 8 texts by World War I poets, most of whom died during the war: Apollinaire, Schramm, Isaac Rosenberg, and to pair a French text, Apollinaire, with a piece of German music, or a German text with a piece of 17th century English music. So within the whole of this soundtrack, there's a song cycle as well, and then the visual art and the poetry is also represented by David Bomberg, who was a painter and during the war became a poet. Isaac Rosenberg, Mark Gertler, who were kind of 3 Jewish working class boys who hung around in Whitechapel Public Library in the early part of the 20th century, which is also a subject that fascinates me. So that comes in as well. And there are shots of a mysterious figure, Hugo Ball, who started Dada, which is either integrated into the film or not integrated into the film. And the other thing is that I sort of made the film, or we made the film, much like writing a piece of music. In fact, with more freedom than writing a piece of music. So there's a sense, I mean, it uses repetition, images recur in a way that they generally don't recur in documentaries, and this isn't a documentary anyway. So
I think on that description, which is suitably mysterious and specific at the same time, we'll say, let's watch the film now. Thank you very much, both of you. That was terrific.